The movie starts with a laboratory mouse entering the wrong cage, only to be immediately devoured by air. Or, better said, by an invisible monkey. We then meet Sebastian Caine, a brilliant scientist with a huge ego who thinks he's the center of the universe. He's been working on a simulation to reverse the invisibility of the monkey we just saw, since all previous tests have failed. His work is going well until Sebastian gets distracted by his hot neighbor who is seen stripping down. Honestly, she should close the window to avoid creepy scientists like him peeping. This ends up serving as inspiration for Sebastian to run a new model and, finally, find a way to reverse the invisibility in the monkey. The next day, Sebastian drives his Porsche to the lab in style. There, we meet the project team, which includes Linda, the scientist who used to be Sebastian's ex. Then there's Matt, Linda's current secret boyfriend, because Linda thinks Sebastian won't take the news too well. We also have Sarah, the veterinarian who hates Sebastian for being a total jerk. Finally, there are Janice, Frank, and Carter, an assistant who idolizes Sebastian. To see if Sebastian's model works, Matt and the egocentric scientist try to capture the runaway gorilla using thermal vision goggles. The team ties the tricky gorilla to the stretcher and administers the serum. At first, it starts having a heart attack, but the procedure ends up being a success. And for the first time, the team manages to reverse the serum's effects. The team goes out to celebrate at a fancy restaurant, but Sebastian is acting strange. So Linda goes to talk to him. He says he feels lost now that he's figured out how to make people invisible. However, Linda tells him there's still a lot of testing to do, since so far they've only tested it on animals. The next day, Linda, Matt, and Sebastian present their findings to the military committee that has been funding their research. However, Sebastian omits the fact that they managed to reverse the invisibility in the gorilla, which leads to a scolding from Dr. Kramer, who tells them the research is taking too long and threatens to recruit another team. Matt and Linda argue with Sebastian because he didn't tell the whole truth. The research leader explains that if the military had known they reversed the serum's effects, they would have taken over the project and excluded the scientists from human trials. Because of this, Sebastian volunteers to be the first test subject for the serum and convinces Linda and Matt to lie to the rest of the team, promising that they'll become famous scientists in human history. At this point, the movie could have been defeated because Linda and Matt should have stood up to their boss. After all, if anything went wrong, they could lose the records if the ethics committee found out. Moreover, Sebastian is definitely not the right person for the first human test, given his egocentrism and self-destructive tendencies. Still, they agreed to the plan, and Sebastian is placed on the stretcher. The serum is administered, and Sebastian says it burns more than a bee sting. This is when things get serious, as he has a heart attack while his body starts turning invisible. The scientists spring into action and miraculously manage to control the side effects, making Sebastian the first invisible person in history.
A great success!
At first, everything seems great. Sebastian plays pranks on his co-workers, and they can only tell where he is using cameras that detect the heat from his body. Since Sebastian needs constant observation, he starts sleeping in the lab, with the other scientists taking turns watching over him. The first unlucky one is Sarah, who is so good at the job that she falls asleep in 2 minutes. This is when we realize that Sebastian is a first-class jerk. He gets up, enters Sarah's room, and takes advantage of her. The woman wakes up startled, but when she looks at the thermal camera, she sees Sebastian in bed. One efficient way to beat this movie, or at least keep an eye on the invisible perv, is to install thermal cameras in all the lab hallways and preferably store the footage for later analysis. Just so you know, at the beginning of the film, it's mentioned that the gorilla was the test subject who stayed invisible the longest, and that drove the poor animal crazy. No living creature can handle the serum's effects for too many days, because not being able to see yourself messes with your mind. Given that, constantly monitoring Sebastian would be a good way to stop him from making any more mistakes in the future. Anyway, the days pass, and Sebastian keeps messing with his coworkers, including moving Linda's soda around, which must be a total pain in the neck. During a work meeting that Sebastian wasn't included in, we see everyone talking behind his back, referring to his god complex and how he's become even more unbearable since he turned invisible. The problem is, these jerks didn't realize that the boss was in the same room overhearing everything. Anyway, the day arrives to reverse Sebastian's invisibility, but after the serum is applied, he says something's wrong. You bet it's wrong, since his heart's stopping, idiot. His lungs also begin to compress, causing Sebastian to stop breathing. Somehow, in his panic, he manages to punch Carter, the sycophant, and even fix Matt's deviated septum. Unfortunately, the procedure is a failure, and Sebastian's body rejects the visibility serum, making him invisible again. I find it incredible how stupid Sebastian is for only testing the serum on the gorilla and thinking it would work on humans. Sure, humans are similar to monkeys, but they still have pretty different specifics. What I'm saying is Sebastian's team should have tested it on people near the end of their lives who would be willing to participate. That way, they would have had enough data to map out the errors and successes of the procedure. But whatever. A few hours after the failure, Linda tends to Sebastian's wounds and says that Matt is working on a theory that could cancel out invisibility. To make do while the cure isn't found, we see the team creating a latex mask, which Sebastian wears to feel normal again. Still ugly, but at least normal. After 10 days of numerous tests, the team is nowhere near a cure, which leads Sebastian to act like a thug fresh out of training as he gets more and more aggressive, even telling Matt to go screw himself. The day comes for Carter to do a shift in the lab, which turns into a great opportunity for Sebastian to exercise his influence on the assistant. The project leader says he's going for a walk on the surface, and Carter doesn't have the guts to disagree with him. If Sebastian had just gone out to scare some innocent kids, that would have been fine, but instead he goes to Carter's house and ends up seeing his hot neighbor stripping in front of the window once again. At first, Sebastian tells himself he can't do it, but within 2 seconds he changes his mind, thinking no one will know if he goes through with his plan. Sebastian then rings the neighbor's doorbell, and when she opens it, he walks in and goes after her. Fortunately, in the version released in theaters, this scene was cut after the neighbor is thrown on the bed. This is the version I saw when I was 9 years old. Since a child's mind is innocent, at the time, I just thought Sebastian had gone crazy and decided to take the girl down, but she's actually assaulted. Director Paul Verhoeven did film the scene and included it in the extended version, but since he had already made people despise the character before this specific scene, he wisely cut it off halfway. The person who finds out about Sebastian's little escape is Linda, who rushes to his apartment to see if he's there. She finds the rubber mask on the floor, but doesn't find Sebastian in the apartment. That's because Sebastian is still in the neighbor's apartment, watching Linda through the window, with no way for her to know what's going on. Man, if Sebastian is a potential threat to the other members of the project, they at least could have taken the thermal goggles home. If Linda had one of those right now, she would have seen Sebastian's crime and could have reported him to the military. Anyway, Sebastian returns to the lab and gets an earful from Linda and Matt, but he defends himself by saying he was just picking up some clothes from home. Despite the backlash, Carter is the one who gets curious about Sebastian's antics and takes the chance to ask if he picked up any chicks on the street. Sebastian says he had the chance and admits he liked what he did. The next day, we see Matt developing a simulation using quantum energy to reverse the serum, but the test fails with a 95% failure rate, which triggers another outburst from Sebastian. Frank stays behind at the lab to keep an eye on Sebastian, who, being much smarter than the lackey, figures out how to loop the thermal camera footage, allowing him to sneak out of the lab without anyone noticing. This lets him go to Linda's apartment just in time to see his ex-hookup getting it on with Matt, which makes Sebastian so mad he breaks her bedroom window. Linda and Matt obviously suspect him and decide to call Frank, who stupidly looks at the thermal camera and sees the looped footage where Sebastian appears to be sleeping in bed. I think keeping the bulldozer and those scientists watching the lab is basically the same thing, because one of the lab's guard dogs won't stop barking, which pisses Sebastian off so much that he goes and kills the dog in the kennel. The next day, Sarah sees what happened to the dog and questions Sebastian, but when she checks the cameras, she's also tricked by the fake footage and believes the dog just dropped dead on its own. What's even more bizarre is that they work in a super high-tech lab, and Sarah doesn't even have the decency to check for Sebastian's fingerprints on the dog's body. Anyway, the next night, Linda is going through some reports when she senses that Sebastian is watching her. In a panic, she runs to the lab and enters his room, realizing he's not asleep. Finally, someone smart figures out the looped footage trick, so she calls the whole team to come up with a plan. The dumbest part in this situation is that she says out loud that she and Matt are going to tell Dr. Kramer the truth. At least she could have put on the damn thermal goggles to see if Sebastian was listening, but nope, she announces it for everyone to hear and goes with the stud to the military guy's house. It's obvious that Kramer gets pissed at them and says they're both fired. Linda and Matt leave, and Kramer tells his wife that he'll call some generals to explain what happened. The problem is, Sebastian had cut the landline, having followed Linda and Matt to the scientist's house. At this point, you'd think a trained military guy would deduce that Sebastian was inside the house, right? Forget it though, Kramer goes outside to smoke his pipe. Couldn't he have just grabbed a cell phone and called the military? Don't tell me he couldn't afford one. Look at that giant house. His stupidity costs him dearly, as Sebastian pushes him into the pool and makes the old man swallow more water than he should, leading to him drowning instantly. Linda goes back to the office and meets up with the team when, out of nowhere, she gets a call from the military saying that Kramer's body was found in the pool. Suddenly, the phone signal cuts off, making Linda and Matt try to escape via the elevator, but they find that their credentials have been blocked by Sebastian, who's the only one allowed to leave the lab. Sebastian then announces on the intercom that the world can't find out that he has this power, because it's something he doesn't want to lose. The lazy scientist also admits to killing Kramer the night before, and only the scientists know the secret. Realizing that Sebastian will tie up all the loose ends, Linda grabs tranquilizer guns and the thermal goggles and distributes them to the team. If you didn't know that Scary Movie 2 was inspired by this film, now you do. Defeating this movie from here on would be the easiest thing in the world if these idiots would just put the damn goggles on to see Sebastian. But no, they prefer to wander through the hallways without worrying about that. Their lack of intelligence costs Janice dearly, as she's the first team member to feel the villain's wrath, as he strangles her with a rope. Realizing that Sebastian is much smarter, the team comes up with another plan. Frank will try to bypass the credential block, while Matt activates the lab's motion sensors to locate the invisible man. Carter and Matt split up to corner the bastard, but they end up crossing paths in the same hallway, and the worst part is, Sebastian disappears. At this point, they could have looked in all directions, up, down, left, right, triangle, and circle, but no. Matt mistakes Sebastian for a heat signature and gets distracted, allowing the invisible scientist to grab Carter by the neck, since Sebastian was hiding above the ceiling pipes. The genius part is that Matt wastes ammo trying to hit Sebastian, but at least he could have put on the damn goggles that were in his hand. Sebastian then throws Carter onto a metal rod, and the injury brings him closer to the light at the end of the tunnel. Since the gunfire caused a steam leak, Sebastian camouflages himself in the smoke, forcing Matt to use a fire extinguisher to try to locate the crazy scientist. The only thing Matt does well in this movie is getting his ass kicked, and the only reason he doesn't get completely screwed is because Linda shows up and pulls him into another hallway. Meanwhile, Frank and Sarah see Carter losing a lot of blood from his neck, which gives Sarah the idea to leave him behind and go to the lab to get some blood for a transfusion. Man, how is she gonna do that in a hallway full of steam? It makes no sense. The problem is she can't get back because Sebastian locks her in the room. At least she thinks fast and throws the blood on the floor to mark the villain's footsteps. But seriously, it's clear that the crazy scientist could just circle around and grab her from behind. Look at the space next to her. Another thing, where the hell are her thermal goggles at this point? She was using them 5 minutes ago, and now she just thinks she doesn't need them anymore. If she had been wearing the goggles, she could have shot the bastard. But no, she gets grabbed from the other side, falls to the ground, and Sebastian breaks the poor veterinarian's neck. Anyway, Matt, Linda, and Frank go after Sarah and only find her corpse. This is when I wonder, the thermal goggles must have some kind of teleportation feature because none of the three idiots has one to use. This makes Sebastian's job easier, as he impales Frank and Matt with a crowbar and then outmaneuvers Linda, locking her in a freezing room with her boyfriend. There, another scene that was used in Scary Movie 2. As Sebastian gives himself a makeover to leave the lab, Linda finally uses her brain and constructs some kind of magnet, which she uses to pull the lock and free herself and Matt from the room. Linda then activates Sarah Connor mode and improvises a flamethrower, which she uses on Sebastian, who turns into a walking pork crackling. Take that, you bastard! Didn't want to be visible. The mini-fire triggers the sprinklers, which helps Sebastian become invisible again. This gives him the chance to surprise Linda and beat the crap out of her. Fortunately, Thanos shows up and hits Sebastian in the head with the crowbar, knocking him out. At this point, he could have defeated the movie by following one of the most important commandments of the channel: always finish the job. In other words, he could have delivered 12 more blows to Sebastian. The lack of action gives Sebastian the chance to get back up and go after the lovebirds, who dodge just in time. And stupidly, Sebastian hits an electrical panel with the crowbar, frying himself instantly and making part of his body visible again. Linda and Matt then start running and discover that Sebastian has set a nitroglycerin bomb to go off in less than a minute, forcing the dynamic duo to climb to the surface using an emergency ladder. Unfortunately, Sebastian wasn't just blessed with the power of invisibility, he seems to have immortality on his side too, because the bastard manages to pull Linda down. Another thing that's in the mix is his virility, since even on the brink of death, he manages to give Linda a final kiss. However, the girl is more focused on pulling the elevator lever they're hanging on, which makes Sebastian fall to the lab floor just as he's about to explode, finally finishing the bastard off. At the end of the film, we see Matt and Linda managing to escape as police and paramedics show up to help. Hollow Man received terrible reviews from both critics and audiences. Little did they know what kind of movie we would get 2 decades later. What I mean is I actually enjoy this film. Kevin Bacon gives depth to the character, delivering some interesting layers. Also, the plot has a sense of paranoia in the air that I think is well done. Plus, Paul Verhoeven's direction remains spot on as always. Finally, the special effects for its time were jaw-dropping, earning an Oscar nomination in that category. However, Hollow Man lost to Gladiator. On the flip side, the film has some plot issues, leading to plenty of conveniences and at least some downright stupid actions from the scientists. Overall, it's a fun movie that I'd rate 7.5. At the box office, the film flopped hard, costing $95 million to make and earning only $190 million. Even so, Sony was tempted to continue the franchise and released Hollow Man 2 a few years later directly on home video. I remember going to video rental stores and always seeing the poster for the second movie, but back then, I already felt it was a low-budget film and never saw the need to spend money on the sequel. If you want me to make the sacrifice, just smash that like button and I'll bring a video on the sequel. Anyway, enough rambling, let's get to the kill count. The total number of kills was 6, with the gold trophy going to Frank.